Hello friends, my name is Ken Johnson, the Paper Alchemist, and I hope you are all doing well. I would like to welcome you to my channel. For my very first channel release ever, I'm going to be walking you through the steps of what I like to call a lookbook, a beautiful way to display your completed works of art that would otherwise go unseen. Essentially, I will be showing you how to take works of art like this and turn them into this. So, first thing is first, we're kicking this off by making the signatures first. Since we already have completed works of art that we are going to be constructing the signature from, it's easier to start with the signature. One thing that I want to keep in mind as I go through is that I want to do everything I can to make sure that the entire calendar page is exposed as each of the pages of the signature flip. So whatever I use to attach the page to needs to be big enough not only to hold the calendar page, but have enough room left over at the side for binding so that the pages won't be obstructed when they turn. We'll talk a little bit more about that a little later on down the road, but I did want you to go ahead and start thinking about that from the beginning. So, for the actual signature pages that I will be attaching the images to, I am going to be using pattern paper. Please note that you do not have to use pattern paper. You can use whatever paper is big enough to comfortably hold the image that you're going to be trying to display on that page. So I won't be giving a lot of measurements, particularly towards the making of the book versus the actual cards I'm using. But I'll be showing you the process, which you will then be able to adapt to any size you would like to. I'm starting with pattern paper. You choose whatever papers you would like to start with that is big enough to hold your image, but has enough weight to have something glued to it without any issues. Now, if you happen to choose pattern paper, let's cover a few things about that. Now, it is my recommendation that if you choose a pattern paper, you try to choose a pattern paper that is double-sided, having an image on both sides. Now, the reason for this is because each individual page will act as a separate signature. So in essence, we have 3 signatures here. If you had a page that only had one side, the other side would be blank, white, or you would actually have to do something to decorate it because it will be exposed and it will be visible. Not unless you're okay with having just a blank white page on the back, which will act as 2 pages in your book, which is perfectly fine if you're okay with that. I just wanted to point that out. The second thing I want to point out if you're using pattern paper is be careful of the direction. It would be my suggestion that if possible, you try to choose a pattern paper that is non-directional, meaning no matter which way you turn it or cut it, you're going to have an image that is positioned the right way. In this case, I happen to be using directional pattern paper. So I want to keep in mind from the beginning that as I cut my papers, I want to be sure to cut in the direction that would keep my image upright, straight, and focused. And it happens to be directional on both sides. Now, lastly, I'll add, for this project, as far as the signatures go, I chose pattern paper that I commonly would not use in other projects. These are pattern papers that would just sit there with me wondering, what am I going to do with them? The reason I did that is because they are going to be cut down so dramatically and have things glued to the top of them. Therefore, you really wouldn't want to use a paper that is precious to you or something that you really wanted to use in like another project that would be have that paper showcased more so in the foreground. In this case, the paper is just for background purposes to have something for our image that we're going to be attaching to lay against a background. So please keep all those things in mind as we get started. First thing you would want to do is to take the actual image you're going to be trying to display and you want to measure that image. Now, I've already previously measured my image. It's 5 1/4 wide and 7 1/2 inches long. Now, That measurement won't matter to you depending on what you're trying to display, your own image, and use those measurements. So now I know I'm working with 5¼ by 7½. I can sit that back to the side and concentrate on cutting down my pattern papers. The first thing I'm going to do is pull out my cutter and cut off the top ring, making sure that I have a 12 by 12 square piece of paper. From there, I'm going to figure out which area of the paper I want to use, and then I'm going to cut it down to make it 7¾ So basically what I'm doing is taking my 7½ inches long for my focal image and adding a 1/4 inch to it, taking it from 7½ to 7¾ So I will be making these 7¾ inches high, and I'm not going to cut anything off of the width just yet. Now we're left with 3 7¾ by 12 inches pieces of double-sided pattern paper, which is directional, and I have cut to include the area of whichever direction I would want from those papers. Again, it's going to be covered for the most part, so it doesn't matter. I do have my offcuts here. These scraps I'll be throwing away, and these I'll be putting into my scrap box for future projects. Now the next thing we want to do is fold our papers in half completely or equally. Now there are several ways you can do this. I'm going to show you a couple of tricks. One trick is you can take your pattern paper, take a ruler, measure halfway in on both the top and the bottom. Take that same ruler, lay it down to form a straight line, and then take a spoon and go down the side of the ruler to score your paper in half. Second way is the folding method. You can actually take the paper, fold it, making sure that all ends meet and line up perfectly, hold it in place, and then press down. Then you could also use a scoring board, where you put your paper down on your scoring board and you score at whatever measurement you would like to. I'm going to be scoring, and then I'll show you a little tip about how to fold your scores, just so your paper can help prevent from cracking. Here I have my scoreboard and my bone folder. Now, if you're using a scoreboard, especially if it's the I believe, Memory Keeper brand, you want to flip this plastic ruler over from the cutting side to the side that has the little groove flipped up and exposed. That's going to help you keep your paper level on your scoring board to help make sure that your scores are going to be even and level. So I'll just flip that down, make sure that lip is up. I grab my bone folder here, and then I'm going to score each paper. Now I know that each of these are 12 inches. At this point, it's going to be considered 12 inches wide. So I'll lay this down. I make sure that I butt it up against the ridge and against the top of my scoring board, making sure that it's snug. And then I'll go over to 6 inches and I'll score. Now let's hold on here. When you score, you want to try to score the paper with the side you want on the outside up. For instance, if I want to fold this way, I would score it this way because it would be creating the peak of the score on the opposite side of the paper. Let me show you what I mean. I'll score at 6. That made a score here. When you score, you have what's known as a valley, where the paper goes in, and you have what's known as a peak, where the paper raises up. I don't know if you can see that. Now, when you fold your score, you want to always fold against the peak, not against the valley, but against the peak, because the peak has pushed more paper here, making it a little bit stronger, and it may help prevent your paper from cracking. So at this point, what I would do is I would line my ends up, make sure that my paper is straight. I want to try to be as even as possible at all times because we want to make this look as professional as possible. And then I'll just fold down my score. I take my bone folder and I'll burnish on both sides. Now, I'll do the other two papers like this and we'll keep kicking. Now that all my papers are folded, it's time to measure again. I'll grab the image that I'm trying to display. I'll grab one of my signatures because keep in mind, in my case, each page is a signature, and I'm going to position it just to see how it fits. And that is actually just about perfect. I love the way that looks. It has about just a little over, or just a little under a 1/4 inch border on the top and the bottom, and a little bit over or about 1/2 inch of a border on each side. So I really like that. Lets me know that I'll be able to fit every single image on each side of the page exactly the same way, which is exactly what we're going to do at this point. We're going to go through and attach each month to one side of the page. Now for this, you can do it several different ways. You can, if you want to do this junk journal style, maybe you want to staple in all 4 corners. Maybe you would like to sew it down. Put both pages, one on one side, one on the other side. Make sure that they line up and then sew them down to attach them that way. Maybe you just want to put a paper clip all around your pages. Clipping 2 on this side, and then on this side you clip 2 in a different area. Maybe you want to do it that way. Maybe you want to glue, which is what I'm going to be doing. If you're using glue, there are several different types of glue out there on the market that you can use, and we're going to get into a video all about glues later on down the road. But for right now, I'm going to make 2 suggestions. The first is, if you're using PVA glue, commonly known as school glue, is basically a white water-based glue that when it makes contact with your paper, it will tend to cause the paper to wrinkle or to warp, depending on how much you use and how thickly you apply it. In that case, if you choose to use a school glue, say like Elmer's or Elmer's clear glue, or any other glue that's made along that formula that has the white tacky feel to it, keep in mind that after you attach each side to your substrate, you want to lay it under something heavy, like a book, giving it time to dry and to flatten back out before you try to actually bind your book together. That's the suggestion for PVA glue. In my case, I'm going to be using Beacon Fabri-Tac. This is a silicone-based glue that is not water soluble, does not have a water base, and it is going to dry quickly with a super strong bond. I love to use this particular glue for crafting. It is a workhorse, and it has come in handy in so many different projects. And my paper won't warp, and I don't have to wait on it to be under something heavy to dry if I don't want to. And so I'm going to go through, I'm going to attach by gluing each one of these to each side of the signatures, and then we'll come right back. Here we have completed signatures ready to be bound into whatever jacket or cover, if that's what you want to call it, that we make. Now, I'll show you these really quick. Each signature has 4 different illustrations in it, one on each side. This is why I told you the pattern paper didn't matter, because you're not going to see much of it at all. You're really just going to see the actual illustrations. And I actually think the pattern paper behind it enhances the illustrations. So that's what the signatures on the inside of this lookbook would be. A couple things we want to keep in mind as we go into making the cover. We want to take close attention to the spine here, the thickness that we have of the book. We want to make sure that we cut a spine that is going to be wide enough for us to bind all 3 in. And if I had to guess, that's about 1/2 inch, maybe a little bit over 1/2 inch. But I'll measure it just to be sure. My measurements don't matter. Your measurements do. Make sure that you measure yours for whatever thickness your pages have. Okay, so we're going to set this to the side and we're going to move on to the jacket. So here's what I'm using for my cover. I'm going to be using a piece of wallpaper. This came from the local Dollar Tree. It cost $1.25. I purchased a lot of them together a long time ago, and I've had this in backstash waiting on the perfect moment for me to use it. So that's going to be part of the jacket. I'm going to be using book board, but this is really thin book board. I'm going to be making suggestions for things that you can use in place of all of this. So just hang on for 1 second for me. I'm going to be using another piece of pattern paper that I've chosen. I really like this design, and I'm going to push the book towards a vintage feel. I think this is going to work well together with the other things that I plan on doing. I'm going to be using some black cardstock, which, mind you, this cardstock is about the same weight as the book board, so you could just use cardstock. You don't really need book board. And I'm going to be using painter's tape and glue. So let's talk about things you can use instead. You can use whatever glue you would like to. For the tape, you could use painter's tape, or you could use masking tape, or whatever tape you feel is going to be reliable and strong enough to hold your book together. But we're going to be using glue in addition to the stickiness of the tape anyway, just for extra security. The book board, as I told you earlier, you can replace with cardstock. You can replace it with pattern paper that is of a cardstock weight. Anything that is of a heavier weight, just nothing that's as thin as, say, like printer paper or copy paper. Nothing that thin. You want something with a little weight to it, just to have some security about your book. Cardstock, pretty self-explanatory. Or you could use pattern paper and instead of the cardstock, because that's going to be what we cover the inside of the jacket with. The piece of pattern paper is going to be what I'm using for the background of my focal image. You can choose whatever you want for your background. Papers you've dyed, maybe coffee dyed or tea dyed, anything that you have that you want to do with this. Let your imagination run wild. I'm going to show you what I did, hoping that it gives you inspiration as to what direction you can go in. And then, of course, this is the wallpaper. Now, if you don't have wallpaper, you can use contact paper, you could use pattern paper, you could use whatever, fabric, because we're going to be using this to actually cover our book. So let's get started. I'm going to show you what I did. We're going to start off with the actual book board, or you can use cardstock in the piece of wallpaper, which again, in this case, you could use whatever you're going to be using to cover your book. First, let's work with cardstock. We're going to take 2 pieces. Now, these are 8.5 by 11 pieces of book chipboard, actually, that I ordered off of Amazon for a project that I had a couple of months back, and I have a few pieces of this left. You could use the backing from your paper pads if you paint or draw and you use paper pads. You know, they have the cardstock backing. You could use that, especially if you have a real thin one. I have several of them here in the studio. Of course, you guys know I have the other channel, which is The Thrifty Apprentice. Make sure you're subscribed over there. Shameless plug. But anyway, we're going to be cutting this down in order to make our front, back cover and the spine of our book. Afterwards, we're going to be wrapping it with this. So the measurements that you use to cut your front, back, cover, and your spine is going to depend on what you're trying to showcase. So first thing I want to do is measure how wide and how long I need the front and the back cover to be. Since these are symmetrical and I've been very careful to try to keep everything lined up, this should be very easy. I'm just going to simply lay it flush against one corner of my chipboard, cardboard, pattern paper, whatever you're using. And then I'm going to measure the distance from the top and the bottom to give myself some space around the book so the pages won't be crunched. I'll grab a pencil and I'll mark those measurements. I'll say I'm giving myself about 1/8 of an inch. It'll end up being, about 1/8 of an inch top and bottom. And then from side to the front of the book, I guess I'll do about another 1/8 of an inch. You will measure yours to be whatever you're showcasing. Now I'm going to cut both of these down in order to be the same size. I won't show that on camera, but I'll be right back. Here is the front and back of my book, as well as the spine. Now the front and the back ended up being 6 1/16 by 8 inches. And for the spine, I simply held my signature together. And because some of the pages have additional paper that's added on it, the book is thicker at the top part. So I used the thickest part of my spine to measure what I would need for my book spine. So since I needed just a little under 1/2 inch, I gave myself a little wiggle room and cut it at 1 inch wide. So now we're going to turn this into our jacket. Back to our scoring board. Now, the scoring board this time is really just going to be used for measurements. In between each number on the scoring board, there's a groove that you would normally use to score. I'm going to be using that groove to actually lay the line of my paper on in order to put the spacing in between each. You can do this by eyeing it. You can simply lay your pieces out. Just kind of eye the distance in between each one in order to do this. I've done that before. But just for a little precise measurement, I'm going to be using this. In this case, I'm flipping this back over because I want everything laying flat. And I am going to see if I can get this lined up. And then I'll show you how. Okay. And that gives the book plenty of room to be in. It's like one of those bars, one of those spaces length apart on either side. So at this point, I'm going to grab my tape and I'll measure a piece that's longer than what I actually need to lay over my seam. Tear that, and then we're going to use glue here. You can apply the glue directly to your board or to your tape, whatever makes you more comfortable. It doesn't matter if you over glue here because this is eventually going to be covered anyway. We're just starting to build our base. I just want to put a little glue down just to help with the whole sticking aspect for the tape. Now the glue that I'm using gets more tacky as it sets up, but it won't dry quick. It gives me a little wiggle room time. You will know how long you have based on the glue that you're used to using. And just get these repositioned. And once I have it approximate, it's stuck to my finger, I'm gonna take my tape and lay it down. Now in this case, I'm trying to get the tape on half of the spine so I can put the rest of the tape on the other half. All right, I'll flip that over and I'll go ahead and wrap that around on the top and the bottom. Now I'll take another piece, measure it out to be enough that I need. We'll put glue again, and this time we kind of have the tape to measure from, just enough to help it stick. We want a secure book. I'll actually put some in the crease on the front side of the tape. And yes, I do have the tendency to overglue. I like to make sure that all of my books are very secure. And then we'll put the tape down, trying to keep it even with the tape just there. Not that it's gonna matter because it's gonna be covered. Okay. This is just to help protect the book. We'll take the bone folder and we'll work inside that crease. Get both sides of that tape stuck together. I have some seepage here. This glue is wonderful because as it dries, you can just roll it. It'll come right off. Another advantage of using this glue. And I'm just gonna make sure that that's sticking on both sides of that crease. And there you have the first part of the book put together with a bendable spine. Now I'm just gonna put the other side on and then we'll keep moving. With your other side attached, you now have the basic structure for your book. You can fold it and there you'll see you have your foundation to build your book upon. Now, because of the materials I used, my board is flimsy, but that's okay. I'm going to be building upon it to make it much more sturdy and stable. Depending on what you use to create your base with, yours may be much more sturdy, much more solid than mine. But nonetheless, let's move on. From here, I'm going to be covering the outside of the book board with our wallpaper. This part is pretty easy. I don't think I really even need to show it to you guys. But basically, I'm going to flip it over on the back. I'm going to lay down my book board. I'll trace my book board. I'll take a ruler, give myself 1/2 inch around from the edge of the book board, and then I'll cut that out. I'm going to do all of that. No, I'll show it to you. We'll just speed through it. Now, with our wallpaper cut out, because it has a sticky back, I simply need to remove the adhesive. With our backing removed, I'm going to put glue onto our book board. I'll center it up and place it down. Not exactly centered, but it'll work. Make sure it's stuck. Miter my edges. Add glue to all of my sides. Fold all of my sides down. And there you have the outside of the jacket covered. And you can see what the basic book looks like on the outside for the basic background. From here, you can build whatever you want to build for the cover of your book. But let's go ahead and reinforce the inside at this point, where we're going to be adding fabric to the spine and then adding pattern paper to cover the front and the back, adding even more stability. As you can see, it's getting thicker and thicker. Now it's time to tackle the inside of the journal. And this is going to be pretty straightforward and easy. We're going to bring in the cardstock that we talked about earlier. And I'm also adding a piece of fabric. Let's talk about the things that we have here. As I told you earlier, for the cardstock, you can substitute this with anything that you have in your studio. Pattern paper, painting papers, pieces that you've painted with acrylic, or whatever you choose, you can use. As to what you choose will determine whether or not you need to do any decorating to the insides of your actual journal. In my case, because I'm going to be using a blank, sort of solid color black cardstock here, I probably will be doing some decorating later on. But for right now, what I want to do is cut each side so that I'll be able to put down a panel to cover what we have here. For the spine, I'm going to be doing some additional reinforcement. Now, what we've done up until this point, as you can see, did help add some stability to my base, but I still want to protect that spine just a little bit more because I know I'm going to be putting holes in it. And for this, I'm going to be using fabric. If you decide to use fabric, you can use whatever pattern you want to, whatever goes with the theme of the book that you're constructing. But you can use other things. Here, you could use decorative washi tape. You could use decorative masking tape. You could use fabric. You could use paper. It's all your choice. Now, I have chosen not to use paper because this is a book that I plan on people looking in. So it'll be opening and closing, quite frequently. Paper does have a tendency to want to crack after so long. So that's the only reason I'm avoiding using paper. I think the strongest of those options is going to be fabric. For the fabric, I've just chosen something that matches the cover that I feel will bring it out. As you can see, it's like this really dark, lightweight denim with this gold speckle imprint on it. So I think it's going to just kind of pull everything together. I'm going to be using my Fabri-Tac glue in order to glue that down. and get it down in those creases really well. And then I'll cover the front and the back with the construction, I keep wanting to call it construction paper, with the cardstock that I've already cut down to fit the inside of each panel. First, I'm going to start off with the spine. And since I'm going to use the fabric, I've already cut a piece that's wide enough to cover the entirety of my spine and to give me a little bit of room to kind of wiggle with. So I'm just going to take some glue. And there are other things you could use for adhesive. I don't use anything other than glue because other things over time might not be as archival as you want it to be, and they could yellow or start to, break down. But we are paper crafting, so there are going to be a lot of things that we do on this channel that are not archival. Now, if you decide to use fabric, depending on the fabric you use and its thickness and the color, you may need to spread that out to make sure it doesn't seep through to the opposite end of your fabric and give you these really crazy glue marks. But because I know that this fabric is both thick and dark enough, I don't have that to worry about. So I'm just gonna glue out, make sure it's all the way up to the edge on both sides, and go ahead and try to place that down in the middle. Now, I might not be perfect with that, but that's okay. I'm gonna put glue on both sides. Now that I have my inside panels attached, my spine reinforced, at this point it would be my suggestion to put this under something heavy to let it lay flat and dry for at least 1 hour regardless of the type of glue you used. So I'm going to do that, give it about an hour, and then we are going to continue with creating our little flip through / lookbook. So cool. We are just about finished, so let's go ahead and bind this journal. Now, the binding method I'm going to be showing you in this video is actually very simple because it doesn't require any staple, any glue, any sewing. You simply need a thick thread, yarn, whatever you want to use, waxed thread, just something strong. I'm using embroidery floss. That's what I use on a regular basis. Of course, I have the signatures that we made here, the jacket, and some scissors in order to cut my embroidery floss with. Now, this is super simple, friends. You're going to take your first signature, lay it in the direction it needs to go. You will then take a piece of whatever you're using to bind, and we're going to measure enough to wrap around the journal. Take it to the back, get it under the spine. We'll take our signature, we'll open the signature, and then we're gonna get just enough thread to get down the middle of it. And this is another reason we made our spine so durable. Now, you could put holes in it if you want to pimp a stitch, but I decided to go in this direction. So what I want to do at this point is just tie this off. You can get it in the middle if you want to, and do as many knots as you feel you need. So I'm just gonna check that. I think that's good. That works for me. It's just a flip book. And the great thing about this binding method is I'll be able to remove these signatures, these pages, and do this, put something else in it if I choose to. I'm just gonna snip. You know what I'll do? Since it's a lookbook, I'll actually snip each one and make a bow if I can. So that is the quick little binding method. Now, so I got my little bow in the middle. I'm gonna close it, close my journal, and then look at my positioning on my spine. So I need to get it a little bit more positioned here. You just work it into place until you get it where you would like it. There we go. So I want that on the back, and it's bound in the front, and I can bind in my other three right beside it using that exact same method, and we'll have a book that's made to be the perfect size. So I'm going to go ahead off camera. I'm going to bind in the other two now that I've shown you how to do it. I'm actually going to go ahead and decorate, because once you get the binding done, at that point, the only thing left to do is if you need to decorate the inside of your journal, you would decorate it however you want to. And then of course you would put on your cover, focal image, or maybe you just want to go with a book plate. Or maybe you want to leave it with whatever paper you put down, because you can absolutely do that. Just put a little sticker on the front that says flip book, however you want to do it. I'm personally making this into something that's going to be sort of a centerpiece on my coffee table in my living room, so people can pick it up and just kind of look back through the paintings. And so I'm going to be trying to do something really special on the cover. But anyway, we're all going to go off and decorate our journals after we finish binding our other two signatures using the same method, super easy method that we did here. And then we'll come back and we'll share. See you soon. So here, my friends, we have our completed book. Let's take a quick look. I'll walk you through everything I did in order to decorate it. There's no decorations on the inside because this is a flip book. So, of course, you know that we use pattern paper for the actual book covering. For the focal image background, again, I used this was wallpaper. For the background, I used pattern paper, this sort of flower argyle type of feel pattern paper, wrapped it around book board. On top of that, I adhered these translucent see-through gold stickers in order to give it some shine and glimmer and a little texture on top of that background. On top of that, there's a book plate that's on simple black cardstock. The focal image itself is on top of its own background, which is butterflies. And I didn't really want to go the butterfly theme, friends, but I did, because it had these gold specks and all of the gold foiling that's on the actual butterfly wings. I thought it just played off of everything really well. And then of course the focal image itself is the heart from the piece of from the middle of a piece of ephemera. So I cut that out. I thought it was really cute to have the gold foiled heart surrounding the North American continent. That was really cute to me. And everything just kind of came together really well. Put book plates on all four corners of that background. Then took clear stones and colored them with an alcohol marker with a color that contrasted and matched everything. And then all of that was adhered to the top of the book. On the corners, we have matching book corners that play off of the book corners that are on top of the background, or should I say, on the corners of the background. And then you would open the book. You're inside, you're still gonna see book corners here. You're gonna get your black cardstock, which I used a stencil and some gold acrylic paint in order to stencil a flower on, or sort of a flower motif, should I say. Then there's January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and finally December. The same mirroring cardstock from the front with the same flower motif in gold was stenciled here. And then of course you get the back of your book, and the binding is exposed, but there are no holes because we did the wraparound binding. And that, my friends, is my flip book of the Grabby 2025 watercolor calendar, all 12 months. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to drop a like, share, and if you're new or haven't subscribed, please go ahead and do so. Hit the notification bell. Comment section is always open. I'll happily answer any questions for you guys, or start up whatever type of conversation around paper crafting you would like. With that, I would have to say, alchemy complete. Just keep creating.